Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Yeah? Is anyone tired at all? Because I feel like this is just like a machine gun, like it's one after the other, which is awesome, but it can be tiring. So, please welcome Dan. He's going to talk about security incident response. And I know it's very coincidental that we announced the intention to acquire Obsgenia. Of course, we had no freaking idea, and it was just how apropos. But Dan, you're coming to talk to us from the perspective of some actual shit that hit the fan.
Yeah.
Yeah? All
Yep.
right. Thus the emoji. Well, everyone, please welcome Dan Hardiger.
Hey, so I'm Dan from Adaptavist. I'm here to talk to you about security incident response. What to do when shit hits the fan. But who are we? Well, we're one of the first and largest vendors in the marketplace. Most of you probably use ScriptRunner or know of us. And so we're quite exposed to these sorts of things. But why are we talking to you? Well, I'll get to that shortly. First, I want to share with you a number. 14,714. This is the number of vulnerabilities issued in 2017 alone. That sounds a lot, but there's a lot of software out there. Some written by you, some written by others. Because all software has bugs. All of them. There's very few exceptions. And some of those bugs will be security incidents. So it's not really a matter of if you'll have a problem, but when you'll have a security incident. If you don't accept this, you shouldn't be running software, let alone writing it. Okay, you've been hacked. Well, maybe not hacked per se. Perhaps you put data somewhere you shouldn't have. Perhaps you had unsanitized inputs, SQL injection, something like that. Maybe you accidentally subverted a security model inside the application, exposed data to users that shouldn't have had access to that privileged information. But we weren't actually hacked. Turned out that we created a vulnerability that would allow others to be exploited should it be exposed. And any of these things and more could create a security incident. Security incidents can come from, well, let's say 3 main sources. First, we have hackers. These are detecting a vulnerability and exploiting it. Perhaps they even put it into a rootkit that allows others to do it in a much simpler way. Also, you might find that they come from researchers, people external to your organization, including customers, and they've responsibly disclosed it to you so you can fix it, sometimes for a fee. Or maybe it's just internally, your developers knocking around in the code, either through peer review or just dumb damn luck, and you came across and you saw something that didn't look right. All of these are places that you can get a security incident coming from, and with a security incident comes a security incident response. And that determines how you react. And it's really important, because you could react like this. You might react like this. You'll probably react more like this. But really, this is how you should be reacting. Executing a documented and well-rehearsed process. And you can only do that if you think ahead. So in this presentation, we'll be walking through what a good incident response should look like and how to perform a responsible disclosure process. But first, let's start with a story. This is the story of our recent ScriptRunner vulnerability, which you probably heard about, and I'd like to share with you what happened behind the scenes, the things that you didn't see, and the things that we did that you don't know about. And hopefully you'll be able to learn and replicate how we dealt with it, and perhaps even tell us how we can improve too. It's all good stories that should. This story starts with a developer. The developer in question was called Thanos. Seriously, that's his name, but great guy. He was working in the source code and noticed something totally unrelated when one afternoon he happened across what looked like a theoretical security hole. He wasn't looking for it. He just noticed something that didn't seem quite right. It was missing something that should have been there, allowing anonymous access to a protected resource. Oops. He escalated, and by the following morning, we'd confirmed the problem and produced a viable proof of concept. It's real. At this point that we needed to form a team, and we realized the potential impact, and we had to call in the cavalry. This is the security incident response team. Okay, maybe the team don't really look like this. They're not superheroes that fly in. They're more a group that come together and offer a helping hand, because they come in peace. This group have to be offering support, guidance, and experience around people who are feeling like they're on fire. So this is what an incident response team typically looks like, because they have to be cross-disciplined, and they have to bring in new skills and experience. So here we have developers that obviously know the code inside out. These are the people that are going to fix the problem, probably that they created. You have product owners that understand how this impacts the features. If you're just going to whitewash over a particular area of functionality, how is that going to impact your users? Marketing and support, because obviously you're going to have to tell someone, and when you do, they're going to ask questions. And leadership, because this is really a business issue, and you need to have both technical and business knowledge inside your organization pulled into this team so you can react quickly without having to go through lots of formal processes. The team has 3 primary responsibilities. They need to determine the severity and impact, which is typically classed as a CVSS score. That's the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. It's a standard way of assessing a vulnerability against some standard criteria. They want to determine the mitigation steps, and they want to determine the communication path. These are really 3 clear objectives, and you're able to measure your path through them. So if you're scoring, then the NIST, which is National Institute of Standards and Technology, or FIRST, the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. They offer you a calculator which will help you do all of this in a very hand-holding manner. You walk your way through it, and they will just do it for you. We realized the scale of our problem when we ticked most of their boxes. And the only factor we didn't max out is that we didn't expose a root vulnerability, unless you were really stupid. We assessed our score that we got against Atlassian security levels. Have a look at trust.atlassian.com. All of this information and a lot more is on there. Unfortunately, we hit critical, and it meant this, which was bad because it affected all of our customers across most of our server platform, past, present, ouch. It's this point we realized that we need to bring Atlassian into the loop. Actually, that was one of the best things that we did. We were scared of walking up to Atlassian in case they were going to shout at us and say, hey, right, we're going to take control and do this for you. They did the opposite. They said, tell us what's gone wrong, and we shared the information with them, but only enough to drive home the severity, not enough to reproduce the problem. We wanted to keep that information tight. And Atlassian handled this remarkably, and mostly what they did was help verify and validate what we're doing, and they'll help coach us through what we should be doing next where we hadn't thought of things. It was an extremely calming experience to go through, and it was great to know that our biggest partner had our back. The responsibility still for communication and for support was still ours, but we had someone who could tell us that we were doing the right thing. Interestingly, we got through this faster than I thought we would. All this happened in 24 hours. Next, we had to set work patching, and it wasn't quite as simple as offering patches for the latest versions. What about customers now out of support? What about customers on older versions but are still paying for maintenance? How do we go about making a patch but making sure it's not obvious what the problem is? We could inadvertently have a patch that exposes what the problem is. Our primary motivation was to make it easy for people to upgrade. We obviously wanted to get them out of a vulnerable state. Patches were ready, most part the same day. But as it was a Friday, we decided to wait until Monday. And it's a good job we did, because in our rush, we realized over the weekend that we'd missed a few edge cases. And actually, the scope was slightly different to what we thought, and so we actually released on Tuesday with a full patch suite. What we released to the marketplace just said the severity and that you should upgrade with very little more information. This is a responsible disclosure process, because we have to communicate to customers, but do it in a reasonable fashion. After all, we don't want to alert potential hackers as to how they can exploit the problem before customers have got the opportunity to upgrade. This is a process which, for us, is still ongoing, almost 6 months on, but it involves 3 main phases. First, you want to get the patches out before saying anything of notability. Then, you want to send out a security advisory, which details the affected versions, the severity, the fixes and the workarounds. A bit more information, but you're still not given any information around what's actually at fault, but you're hammering home the point that if you're still vulnerable, this is what could happen. And finally, you detail the vulnerability, and where appropriate, you might even submit a CVE, which is a common vulnerability or exposure, so that you're publicizing the information. You might even want to go as far as publishing a proof of concept. But the goal of all of the above is to make sure that the information enters the public domain at the same rate or faster than it goes into the hacker domain, so that the customers have got the information at the same time or before hackers are exploiting it. So what would we have done differently? Because we learned a lot. Pulling the handbrake and swarming the problem is the right thing to do. It really helped us get the right people looking at the problem. But slow down. The vulnerability has been in the wild for a while. We did all of this within 24 hours. It's been in the wild for maybe 4 years. Would another 24 hours really hurt? Maybe. But we took the view that we did the right pace. But think in your cases how that should apply. Make sure you support the person who found the vulnerability, because they're probably feeling rather shitty. They're going to feel like I've undermined the product, and actually no, they've helped. This was a vulnerability was there, whether they found it or not, and you've improved and helped. And so always reward and embrace people who are able to improve your product, and treat this like someone who just found any other bug and was able to fix it. Bitrock could bite you. So can you build old versions? Have you tried building an older version of your software? If you might have problems with dependencies. We were lucky in this regard, but we noticed that it could have caused us problems. Treat security vulnerabilities like you do disaster recovery. In your organizations, you should have this sort of mentality that we should test our backups every 6 months. Perhaps you should also see what would happen when you run a fire drill, or even a drill around a security incident response. Look at bug bounties. We'd never really opened up our doors to encourage other people to try and find vulnerabilities in our software. Atlassian are looking into an organization called BugCrowd, and we're doing the same now too. So I'd like to give you some things you can actually take away. So I did a lot of talking, but some of these slides are nice and screenshotable. And so where they build out, it'll be clear how many bullet points they're going to have. So feel free to take photos, as these are the bits that should be useful. Please take photos. If you don't want it, I'm not sure why I'm here. So first is our security incident response plan. And it has 6 stages. First, we have to identify and triage a problem. We'll then form an incident response team, as I described before, around it. And we'll then score, using CVSS, what the issue is. All this information will be shared amongst the team, which will then go off and build a patch. Get those releases out as soon as you can, with as little information as you can. We then need to communicate, potentially using a CVE, and get our channel working. And finally, we want to run a retrospective. This is really important. Don't just do a retrospective on how well you ran through the process, but do a retrospective on the process itself. In fact, I would love to hear from you if you think there's a stage we're missing or a thing we've overlooked. You might want to consider accreditations like ISO 27001 and 27018. 27001, most people know, is because it's an international information security standard. It's rather onerous, and there's actually 27018, which is a very similar thing, but for cloud and the data storage issues and encryption that you have in that world. Both of these focuses on policies and processes, and look at auditing quite closely, but they give an air of confidence that you've at least assessed the impact of various aspects of your development plan. If you think ISO 27001 is onerous, or even if you already have it, then take a look at Cybersecurity Essentials. It covers a subset of the same information security areas, and is produced by the UK government. It's broadly applicable, and I think the guidance is worthwhile following, regardless of where you are. However, your territory might have some specific guidance for your local legislations. It focuses on the threats that are in the networked world, and it gives you some very easy steps that you can take to question yourself about the things you do, like where do I store my code and who can put a release into my customer's hands. It's much less involved, and it's a great step forward if you're wanting to take a large compliance step. Secure software development and deployment is an important aspect of anyone's SDLC. And so this isn't just about worrying about how you build your code, but the secure aspects around it. How many people does it take to make a change? that impacts customers? How is it easy for a mistake to go unnoticed? And how many people review those things? How can your customers trust that the code that they are running is genuinely and exclusively from you and hasn't been just built and uploaded directly? How could someone manipulate the outcome of your software through influencing your development or deployment process? Perhaps one of your dependencies. Talking about dependencies, how many of you scan them for vulnerabilities? And then have a look at Atlassian's security vulnerability reporting, and you'll see just how many of those come from vulnerable dependencies. You should know when vulnerabilities go into your dependencies, because it's pretty easy for me to work out which dependencies you have, and it's pretty easy for me to work out which of those has vulnerabilities too. The two that are most known are Sneak and Source Clear. As well as unit, functional, integration, and performance testing, which I'm sure you're all already doing, there's the question of security testing. Here we look to a few different types. So we have using vulnerability scanners that we can put into our build pipeline. We also engage external testing teams through penetration testing activities. So look for things like Tiger Scheme and others that underpin their activities. You can also invite participants within bug bounty programs and pay per bug that they find. BugCrowd are a popular platform for this. There are a few alternatives. If you found this content of this talk useful, you might also be interested in hearing from Kane from Atlassian. He's going to be talking about securing your app in the cloud. That's tomorrow in room 4. And also, there's a security fire pit session hanging straight after it if you want to discuss with like-minded people. Finally, if nothing else, remember XKCD 538. That is to say, a $5 wrench will break any encryption. Thank you. Two minutes for questions?
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, here you go.
You said that that vulnerability was in script runner for 4 years, so I assume it was server. And another thing you said was, would another 24 hours hurt? So my question was just, do you have any strategies or any way of being able to tell if it was actively being exploited in any of those server instances?
We have no verified exploits out in the wild. There's ways for us to test for it, but we can't tell other people how to test for it. And that was one of our biggest challenges in creating a workaround, because the detail we would have to expose would put other people at risk. And that was one of the biggest challenges that we had, and one of the things we went back and forth with Atlassian on, and they said, yeah, it sucks, but actually in this case, on the side, and perhaps later, once we see an uptake, because we watch the amount of customers that have installed patches, and so we see the adoption of non-vulnerable versions, and at some point we'll probably have that conversation, but it's not yet.
Who here has had an incident in which you had to deal with our security or legal or incident team? Just do this so that no one else can see. All right. There's 3 here. I get pulled into those sometimes because my team, the dev relations team, has relationships with you guys, and yeah, it is not a frantic process. It's very calm and collected, because this is what they do, I guess, professionally. But at the same time, I think that, like when you saw Brendan up there talking about best practices for incident management, for security and privacy, just generally, I think that in a couple months that I've been here, that I'm getting a sense that it's not getting any less frequent issues, right, and incidents. Any other questions anyone has? Yeah.
Can you provide us an URL or contact details to Atlassian? Because in our case, we raised an incident at Atlassian because of a vulnerable of an add-on, and do not get any feedback within days.
Dev help.
So if you go to go.atlassian.com/devhelp, there's a security incident type. It's a JSD. So that gets, yeah. Well, I guess we'll have to dig into it.
I'm sure Kane would be pretty interested in hearing the details, notably your ticket number.
No.
I'll talk to you afterwards about that one.
You can also just email security@atlassian.com. That's monitored close to 24/7. You can email me. I'm head of security for Atlassian. A Ludwig, ALUDWIG at Atlassian. That's not monitored 24/7. But if you hit both of them, then the people at security will usually respond more quickly.
Any other questions? I think that Shri had Atlassian.com/ops on his slide deck around the incident playbook. I don't think that's right. That's around your ops. So if you just go to Google search for Atlassian plays, and you'll see the vendor incident stuff is in there, and it's pretty interesting. It's pretty good stuff. Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
Dan.